Hello, bookish friends. It is the end of February. Well, it's the beginning of March, if we're being completely honest. But the end of another month, which means, yay, another reading wrap up. This month was weird. I'm just gonna throw it out there. I read like so much in January, and like you could definitely say I'm in a reading slump at this point. I'm more affected in these few like week and a half of March than I have been in February. So out of the books I read, I would say I'm surprised by like a fair few of them. Like one of the books that I read that I thought was going to love, I actually did not like at all. Whereas this one that I had kind of been putting off reading because I thought I wasn't going to like it, actually like enjoyed it quite a bit. Read some chunky, chunky books this month. In January, I read a lot of like the 300 to like 400 range. And you know, that went out the window this month. I'm going to go through these in order that I read them. So sorry for all the people, or sorry for the books at the beginning, which are not as fresh in my mind. And I will talk about one that I ended up doing a reading vlog for as well. So I'm not going to go too in depth just because I already talked about it in a vlog. So, all right, let's get into it. It's early in the morning. I have a cup of coffee and, it is Harry Potter themed as well, just because, you know, life. So yes, first up, I have conversations with friends. Oh, of course, my cat like decides this is the moment that she wants to scratch. All right, so I did Conversations with Friends, which is my second Sally Rooney book. And this is the one that I thought I was going to hate. So I read Beautiful People, Where Are You? Over the summer, I think in like, I don't know, August or something after it came out. I bought it on a whim, not having like read any other Sally Rooney books, but just like kind of picturing like from the friends to lovers, like romance, that I was going to like it, which I 100% did. Loved that book so much. And I've been nervous to read her other two books. Mainly because a lot of people have said that they liked Beautiful, Where Are You the most out of all of her writing, which makes sense if she's improving her craft. That like the books are going to get more sophisticated, and you know, like she's going to be growing as a writer throughout the period. But I was going to say that the characters to me in Beautiful, Where Are You seemed to be the kind of characters that I like the most. Whereas the characters in her first two books, I do not think that I would relate to them as strongly. And I would say that's still pretty true. I don't relate to the characters in this book. However, it was like really good and way better than I was expecting. You know, like this girl who is, she has like this friend that she had been dating, but is no longer dating. They're just friends now. Yet they are collaborative partners in the creative process. They do like these like poetry. She writes poetry and then they perform them together. And they, at one of their events, like they, you know, like at a poetry event or something, they meet this photographer who's like much older and is well known. And they start to hang out with her because she's kind of like taken them under her wing. Reminded me a lot of the movie While We Were Young, which also I don't really remember much about, but I remembered liking. And this book made me also want to like go back and watch that movie again. So I'll put like the link in the description for anyone who's interested. And would say that a rewatch is on the horizon for me as well. So maybe we could talk about that in the comments. She starts to be like attracted to not necessarily the friend or the woman that she was introduced to, but instead her husband, who is like going through time, like clearly. They are clearly having like troubles with their marriage, which seems to be like tying back to like some of his like emotional turmoil that he's been going through, and it's like affected their relationship. Understandable as well. And like they are like pretty progressive people in general. So I don't know, like an affair isn't completely out of the question, so to speak. It was very interesting. I really liked it. The main character, Frances, like is annoying, but also she's only 20. So like, that's my thoughts on that. Yes, I was annoyed with her, but also I would expect to be because she's so young. Makes me also want to try Normal People as well. Even though I'm the most nervous about that because I watched the Hulu show and liked it, but was really annoyed by it. And I can't imagine like also experiencing it through book form as well. Okay, next I'm going to consult my notes because this book I read on my Kindle. But the next one I read was The Night Circus, which was, I would say, something I was looking forward to. It was pretty hyped. I've heard a lot of people like talk about this book, how it's very like atmospheric, and 100% agreed. Like, yes, it was very like magical and like very like kind of steampunk because it was Victorian, but there was inventions that seemed to defy like the realist world, which they did because they were magical. So there are a few characters who are kind of like the heroes or the narrators of the story, and then they also intersperse with chapters about like you, as if you are like entering the spectacle of it all. Behind the scenes of this circus that's very popular and has kind of created like this little cult, there are two magicians who are competing. And at the beginning of the story, they are both like, you know, I don't want to say orphans, but they're both children who have like sad familial circumstances, and they basically get taken in by like these two rival magicians and bound into some kind of like competition when they're going to train. And as they get older, they're going to enter a competition with each other, and only one person can win. The stakes are high. And of course, it's all turned on its head when they start to have like kind of a romance as well. The writing was beautiful. The story was imaginative. I liked the pacing of it. I liked the characters. Like, they were intriguing. But I will say that the romance for me, like, could have been teased a little bit more. Like, I think I would have appreciated more like interaction or more understanding about why the characters like felt so strongly about each other. And especially since it seemed that, like, obviously this is just one competition or one duel that has happened like multiple times before. And it seems to be something that kind of happens a lot is that the two people like fall in love with each other. If these two are showing off their magic to each other, and it gets to the point where like they're the only ones that can kind of understand the other's perspective, and like each new feat is kind of like a new love letter almost like to the other person. I feel like I would have just appreciated more chapters from each person's point of view about how much each action like meant to them, if that makes more sense. So like, not necessarily that they needed more like social interaction or that they needed like any more like, I don't know, steamy scenes or anything like that, because that was not the vibe of the book. So that's not what I'm saying. But I would have appreciated a little bit more romance, a little bit more, I wish it was more spelled out, I think, or like we could see them falling in love with each other, as opposed to just being like told that their feelings were so strong and why. So that was my only critique. I did really, really like the book. And it does make me want to read some more of her work just because I did really enjoy it and it lived up to the hype. Okay, next one I also read on my Kindle. Gotta look at it again. Wow, this feels like so long ago. Okay, the next book I read was The Silence of the Girls, which is a retelling of the Iliad from the perspective of Briseis, who's going for like a feminist retelling. Like, you know, the Iliad is all about men, as we know. It's about war. It's about the Trojan War. So I'm always interested to see if like someone's retelling is like as good. I've also read the original Iliad, just because I was like, if I'm reading all of these retellings, like I should go back and read the original. The writing was really good. She had some like interesting perspectives, but also like nothing really new, so to speak. Like I've read other retellings with feminist perspective, and I'm not sure like how much like Briseis's story like actually added to that and showing like anything new. The part that confused me most about this was that it only included the Iliad, which I feel like was a missed opportunity, because like Briseis actually lives through like the entire Trojan War, and eventually like goes on to have like, you know, another life post thing. Like she goes back to Greece, I think. So if that's the case, I feel like it would have been much more interesting for me to have seen her origin story than this tumultuous thing that she went through, and then what her life looks on the other side of it. That would have been the opportunity to take something that everyone already knows about and take it further or add like a new fresh flavor to it. It just didn't feel like enough in a world like so clogged full of Greek mythology retellings. Not really sure how I felt about it. As like a standard book, if it was the first one I had read, I probably would have liked it a little bit more. Okay, next, getting into the chunky books. So I think at some point soon I'm going to do like a review of like all the books I got for Christmas and like my birthday and stuff, which was in like December and January. And how I've managed to like get through them, just because I do read most of my stuff like in general through the library. So I'm constantly trying to like keep up with my holds and everything. And then also lately I've been trying to filter in all of these all of these gift books essentially that I've gotten, like over Christmas and then for my birthday, just because everyone knows I love books and I asked for books and they gave me books. And then I was like, oh no, it's too many books. It's crazy to have like such a backlog of like physical books, while also juggling like all the books that I have taken out from the library or like requested from the library when they do become available. The rest of the books I'm going to talk about are books that I've bought recently and have read. So the first one is the highly anticipated 9th Outlander book, Go Tell the Bees That I'm Gone, which, as you can see from like my beautiful Juniper Books dust jackets, like I'm a very big Outlander book fan. I read them all in 2020, mostly over the summer. Blew through them, despite them being like huge books. I probably did it in like, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 months, like mixed in with all my other reading. Like this book, it covers like so many different genres, which I know is something that like Diana Gabaldon like says in interviews all the time, is that like no one really knows how to like categorize these books. And I would say that's fair. Like they are, I would say at their core, like very historical fiction type book. So there are some characters that are real. There are mostly characters who are not real, but the book themselves like goes into so much detail about historically what's happening like in a few different settings, because the book starts in Scotland. There's like some sea voyaging in there, and now like they are in the American colonies during the time of the Revolutionary War. So like huge range in terms of topics. There's also like so much information about like medical practices like back then, just because Claire, the main character, like is a doctor from like the modern times, which would have been like the 1940s, when she like first goes back in time. And then there's also just like, it's obviously a romance as well, and a story about like family, a story about like interpersonal like tensions and like connections. There's a lot of religion like woven into it as well, just because a lot of the conflicts back then had to do with religion, especially like with the whole like Scottish heritage, and like the, I don't know, I won't say war, but the whole like conflict between Protestant and like Catholic religions. I've learned like so much about like the history of religion through history of Western religion, I should say, Western Christianity, like through these books. So it's just like, it's such an experience. And I would say I tend to read these books a lot slower, like just because I want to like soak in all of the information like so intensely. So I read really slowly, and like the pages themselves in general are like quite large also. But yes, I really loved this book. And in terms of like, you know, I don't want to like get into it because I feel like I'm not even sure like how many people have read some of the books versus like all of them. But yes, it's a modern person who in the first book goes back in time. She is in danger essentially from the British army, which is occupying Scotland at the time. And she has to like form a marriage, like she has to get married as a way to like become protected. So even though she was married in modern day, she gets married to a person like in the time period whose name is Jamie. And he has like a lot of his own issues. And they basically pulled into the second Scottish uprising, mostly historical, but obviously there's a lot of like there's some fantasy elements with like the time travel involved, and the time travel has rules, which are something that's been like uncovered like during the entire like books series, especially like as there are generations that are like happening. So the story, like the cast just keeps getting bigger, and the amount of people who have like a stake in the main story like just get increasingly large. The main characters, like though I don't know, in the same time period, they were in different areas. And so there was a lot of like different connecting pieces that were like woven together. And some of the characters who I've really grown to like had like increasingly larger roles like in this book, which was also like really cool. We'll just leave it at that. But yes, loved this one. All right, next, another honking sized book that I read. Oh, and I still have a sticker on it. Whoops. So this is a reread for me. I read The House of Earth and Blood in prep for the new, like the release of House of Sky and Breath, which happened like in the middle of the month. This book, I really liked it the first time I read it, which was a couple of years ago. I still enjoyed it, like reading it through the second time. I do always end up like rereading books like a little bit slower. So it takes me longer to reread a book than it did when I read the first time. So, and I think it's just because I'm like more familiar with the story. And so like, I'm not as like pushed to like keep reading as much. So it's probably that I just read less. It's not necessarily that I go slower. But yeah, I mean, this is a great book if people are, if people are into like urban fantasy. Like I thought this one did it well. I think that's something that's not talked about, I feel like, in relationship to this book as much, is like the friendship that's represented here. I feel like is really cool, and the like Sarah J. Maas like does a nice job of kind of like challenging what you think about friendship and showing like a unique side of it. I feel like that's pretty cool. It's like the story of this girl, Bryce, who gets pulled into an investigation in like a fantasy world where like there are different factions of magical beings who, like are basically all like a higher class than the humans. And she herself is like a half fae person, which kind of puts her in a weird like middle ground. And there is tragedy that befalls her in the beginning of the book, and an opportunity to follow up on it in the later half of the book, like the main plot. There's an investigation that is related to the tragedy that she went through. And so they see her as like a good person to kind of connect the dots, just because she has like more of an inside perspective. So she teams up with someone from the government, and they start looking into like mysterious occurrences, etc. But yes, I really liked this when I read it, and I was excited to kind of dive back in preparation for the new release, especially because like I had completely forgotten everything that happened in this book. Like all of it was gone. So it was necessary that I reread it. Okay, moving on to this one, which is honestly the same amount of pages, but also like is so much thicker. Bizarre and stupid, in my opinion. Just because it looks ridiculous, because it's twice the size, and also it takes up more space in my bookshelf, which means less books. Or more bookshelves, I guess, depending on who asks. Okay, I'm not going to go super into depth on my reaction to this book. I'll just leave it at, I was really disappointed. And if that intrigues you and you want to know why, you can go check out my reading vlog that I did on this. So House of Sky and Breath, I was really expecting a lot. Felt like I was let down. Am I still going to keep reading? Probably. I'm hoping that it's just like a problem with the second book, which sometimes happens, The last book, which I admit I did pick because it was nice and short. And I was like, wow, I did not get to a lot of books number-wise like this month. So I am going to throw in a little like 100-pager. So this one is a poetry collection that I got from the Barnes & Noble hardcover sale. Yay. And it's Emily Dickinson envelope poems. And basically, it was just like a really cool book. Reading quality like a little bit questionable, I will say, because these are all unfinished poems that they basically went through, like Emily Dickinson's things, like after her death. And they pulled together a bunch of envelopes that she wrote, like kind of scrappings of poetry on. So it's definitely more of like a work in progress feel, and not as polished as like the actual Emily Dickinson like final product that we're so used to seeing, with like the little rhymes and like great existential dark imagery that like everyone just loves, as do I. But I liked how they did the book, and it's very like gift like. I would recommend this like for the person, I would recommend this as a gift for a person who likes poetry and wants something that's like a little bit different. It's like, an expanded version of like just getting someone a poetry book. Like this is just like a little bit step up. And it's also in the introduction, they note that this is a shorter version of like a limited edition book that these scholars collaborating on called The Gorgeous Nothings, which was a much larger collection of these envelope poems. And this one is just like much more condensed. So basically the book, they have the original, there's like a photograph like of the original like manuscript. They have like a breakdown of the poem with like all of the different words that were being used, and they try and like preserve the way that they were placed, which is like really cool. So, you could definitely like read her writing on one side, and then you could kind of like puzzle it out on the other. It was very cool. Like I really enjoyed this as like a book. And yeah, it was just very unique, and it was a great way to end the month. So a small win. All right. So, yeah, as I mentioned, this list was like all over the place, and there was 3 gigantic books at the end, which definitely compromised the number of books. And I would say, like at this point, I'm currently like behind on my current like reading, my reading for like the month and for like the year. So, guess I'm gonna have to like get it together for like March. So wish me luck on that. And it was nice to chat with all of you. And, I'll see you again soon. All right. Bye.